What's going on, guys, and welcome to the final episode of the free 3D modeling course that I'm doing here on YouTube. I'm really excited that we got this far and was able to build the full 3D object with a lot of fun details. You can totally comment down below if you want me to do a UV mapping / texturing course, because that's the stage in which we would need to actually start optimizing things and getting them ready for a game. But for a modeling preview course for beginners, we don't need to spend an hour merging all of these vertices for no reason when it's already working really well, and simple tools like pressing A and then trying out the mesh cleanup limited dissolve, that already cleans it up for us a lot. And I don't want to do it to these subdivision surface models. I don't mind trying to give it a shot at these more hard surface models, except ones that are way too rounded like this. So I'll grab these ones, go to edit mode, let's try mesh and clean up and limited dissolve, wherever it ran off to. That worked out pretty. I have all these faces selected and I want to kind of flatten them out, so I'm pressing SZ and 0, and it did copy that to the other one. And it seems like it copied that to that one too. So it seems like I beveled that one just a little bit too much. I'm enjoying the sharp edges we have going on around here, and that could be considered the world's quickest cleanup. Again, if you want to watch me merge this further, you could recommend a UV mapping and texturing course down in the comments below. And so even though this is a modeling course, I want to give us the gracious gift of at least getting us one renderable picture of this. Now, if I were preparing this to be a game asset, considering its size, it would probably be one material, but we're going to do a special trick in Blender. For how big this object is, I want to have a different material assigned to it. So I'm not worried about the actual color information of any of this. I'm not going to texture it. But what I am going to do is try to get us these soft bevels through the shader, and then we can do a quick lighting pass and get a nice image out of it. So before we even do that, we're going to go to a very awesome website, and ignore my ASMR in the background. We're going to go to a website called Polyhaven. And Polyhaven used to be called HDRI Haven, and it has a huge library of materials and HDRIs. And now that you've completed this asset, I think you've earned the right to go check out this website. That's for sure. So I'm going to hunt down the HDRIs, and I'm going to look for something in the studio section. And I'm not going to try to be too picky about which one, but I don't think I want too much color information. If anything, something a little bit dramatic would be pretty cool. Studio Small 2, and we can always change this later. For Blender, I like to use the HDR format, and then I'll just download it. I'll go ahead and put it in a folder I can access frequently, and then I'll import it into Blender. So now here in Blender, I have this image, and I'm going to keep track of where I've located it, because we're going to change tabs for the first time, and we're going to go into the shading tab. So you can see it just added this panel below the modeling tab. We've also got this image preview over here. Maybe I can quit PureRef, because I'm not too worried about the reference image at this point, because we're not going directly for the realistic material. Let's just get something we can get some lighting on. So we have the object material, and if I click on the object dropdown, we also have the world material. So in the world material, notice we have a background, and we can change the color of it, and we'll only notice it under the material preview over here. So we've been taken into the material preview, and we can't actually see the background because it's displaying this HDRI here in the dropdown. So we'll use scene world, and right now that's a little bit scary. So we are going to turn scene world off, but we know that this background can change the color in the final render. I'm going to bring this back to a regular gray, and I can press delete to bring it back to a near white value. So what I wanted to do was a kind of a special mixture in this node tree. The nodes are a little bit scary, but we're not going to get too deep into them. I'm happy to dive super deep into them in a future course. But like modeling, I can press Shift D and I'll duplicate this background. And the reason is because I want a background that we can see in the actual background, and a background that just lights this object. For the background that's actually the background, maybe that can be a color. Perhaps it could be just a desaturated light gray. And to light our object, I'm going to add something to this node graph with Shift A, and I'll type in environment texture. When I click open, I can go to that project folder and go ahead and add the HDR. I'll plug it into the background node down here. And because we installed the Node Wrangler add-on way back when at the beginning of the course, let's make sure we have it installed. Mine is installed. we not only have the option to preview everything with Control-Shift-Click, we can't really see it because it's not giving us the information we need, but we can map this and any image super fast with the material editor with the Control-T shortcut. So I added these pretty crazy nodes. For now, why don't we try to plug the background into here, and I'll actually go into rendered mode. Now we'll see that HDRI, because it's plugged into the background, is completely lighting all around the surface. So it uses the image to generate light. Even the colors are related to the HDRI, so it will reflect some of this information in here, which makes it more realistic. The only control I'm looking for is the Z rotation, because it could be kind of fun to rotate things around and get the most appealing image that you can. Now, like I mentioned, I don't want this crazy background in the actual background. So we're going to get some pretty crazy nodes. I'm going to type Shift A and type in light path. And the light path is basically a mask based on all sorts of crazy 3D parameters. And still, this doesn't make entirely too much sense to me, but you may as well know it. If we get something called a mix shader, we can have one background and two backgrounds, and the mask could be this first node called the is camera ray. We'll plug that into the final output, and that it actually worked correctly. So this light gray can be changed at any time, and now we have a different colored background, which is pretty cool. Now I'm going to zoom in into our model. And finally, we're going to tackle these really sharp edges. What I want to do is go back into the object preview, and we'll give everything its first material. I'll do our due diligence and actually organize our project. I know we still have our cutters, so I'm actually going to duplicate this object, and I'll move that and the cutters to a new collection with the M key, and I'll call it the backup. And I can always hide that. So I'll delete the cutter collection, and for this one, and this one, and then all the final meshes can be in one collection. And we'll call this the EXP S3. I just figured after all this work, we may as well call a screw, and a knob. So I'll be right back. Okay, and so I've renamed all of these meshes pretty easily. I've just called this the base, the base of the front. We have our cord, a knob, large screws, round screws, square button, round button. We can go back to the world editor as well, and we could always change the rotation and get our, most favorite lighting in the image that we want to take. So back into object mode, what I wanted to do with this is add our first object material. So we'll click on new. And we can keep this really basic since this isn't a material course, but we can change the color to anything we want. For now, we'll keep it at red, and then maybe at the end I'll tweak it and we'll show off the final one. As a super quick overview to this principled BSDF node, it's basically just the basic material node for next-gen games and all sorts of 3D rendering. If we slide the metallic slider, it is reflecting as a true metal would. This is based on a sort of science. So if it were a metal with no paint on it, you could keep this at 1 or keep it at 0 if it were a plastic. It's more or less up to the look that you like better. So the roughness is the amount of shine. If it's fully rough, there's basically no shininess to it. And if it's not rough at all, it means it's going to shine a lot. We could start seeing the reflection of that HDRI that we put in because it's so shiny. But if we smooth it out or diffuse it out because it's getting rougher, then it's pretty much not interacting with those specular highlights. The alpha would be the transparency, and depending on the type of material it is, like if it were a very basic glass, you could have this at a halfway point, but most of the time it's used to be fully opaque. And then if it were like, say, an image of a leaf or a decal, but then we don't want the polygon plane to show on the outside, we'd set it to 0 on the outside. So we can get all sorts of cool illusions like that. We're not going to worry about all of these for now. The only thing I want to look at was basically that base color, picking how shiny and how metallic we want it. For now, why don't we make it a cool gold if we can? And then it looks like we'll have to change the world color for that. And we're going to do a cool trick where I select everything, and with this gold object selected, I'll press Control L, and we can link materials together. Same difference if you had duplicated something with Shift D instead of Alt D, and now they're not changing together. For example, I want to change this model, but I thought it was going to happen to this one. What I could do is select this and then select the main one and press Control L, and I can link the object data. And so now it'll always copy to other instances. Maybe a little late to learn that if you're exhausted, but you may as well know. So this is looking fantastic, and the last thing I want to discuss is the bevel shader. Instead of going through the entire subdivision process and having to re-topologize everything just to get some slight curvature out of these sharp edges, we've built a fantastic base model, and I think it's time to utilize one of the newer shading methods, which is that bevel shader. So I'm just going to type Shift A and type in bevel. Now, I don't think we're going to notice it at first, but I am going to plug this into the normal factor, and I'll also set the samples to 16. Now, the reason why we can't see this is because it's only available in a certain renderer. If I go to the render properties, we'll notice we're in Eevee, and Eevee sort of acts like Unity, Unreal Engine, or any video game you play. So it moves incredibly quickly at like 60 FPS and more, and we're able to do live edits in the rendered view, even with all this cool lighting and material information. However, there's a stronger, more powerful one called Cycles, and it's using a lot of science to figure out how much the light reflects off of surfaces and through surfaces, and you'll notice it completely transformed, and that's because of this bevel shader. Let's unplug it, and we get our original model back, and we still get that realistic lighting that comes from this Cycles renderer. And if you have a stronger computer, you could set this to GPU compute, and it'll load even faster. It's actually loading incredibly fast compared to when I started 3D modeling. Holy cow. Okay, so we're super close to finishing. We're just going to plug that bevel back in here. I'm going to rename this to Metal Large Bevel. And this is not a texturing course, so these are not the actual material names we would use if we were to take this through the whole texturing process, but I just want to show off the bevel shader as quickly as possible. So we have the large one, and now I can go to this one, and I'll duplicate it. I'll duplicate the material and call it small metal. And all we have to do is drag this one lower, something like 0.02. And so maybe for the large metal, we could set it to 0.04. And now all we got to do is we have to go out of our way to find all these small items. So if it has the name screw, I'm going to assign it to this same material by pressing Control L and link materials. And for now, we can make this darker so we could really see what's going on. So I want all of these to have a small bevel, and I don't mind this one having a large one, and I think that is pretty good. So I'll press Control L on any of the ones with an active small bevel metal, and that seems to be working out for me pretty well. Maybe I'll even assign it to the glass too. So grab the glass, and there we go. Now I'm going to bring this brightness back up so that you can't really see the difference, but you can feel the difference with the size of these smooth polygon edges. So if I go back to layout mode, we could look at our model, and I can click on the rendered view. All I would need to do is press Shift A, search, let's type in camera. It just spawned a camera in a random place, but let's spawn it in a place we want. So I'm going to look at it from an angle I really enjoy, and I'll press Control Alt 0. What that did was it set the active camera's view to whatever we were looking at, so we can get a nice cool view of our holographic sight. Now down here in the data, we have a new camera tab, and we can change some of the settings. I like a really long lens for hard surface renders like this, so I'm going to do something closer to 100. And if I want to zoom out directly to where the camera's aiming, we are in local mode. Remember these transform orientations? So with that camera selected, I'll press G and see which one brings it back. Looks like it's G and Z. Now I can change the aspect ratio of this camera too. by going back to the render options or the output options, and I think I'll make this render 2000 by 2000. So by changing the resolution, it also changes the aspect ratio. I could zoom back in, or we could lengthen the focal length. And that looks pretty cool. So we don't need to worry about depth of field. There is a small trick we can do where we add a plane at the bottom of the origin point, and now you'll notice we're capturing the shadow. So let's zoom out a little bit with the camera and capture the entirety of that shadow. And now what I can do is I can go to the object data of this plane, and I can go down to visibility, and I'll just click on shadow catcher. So now it's only rendering that shadow, but we still get the really cool solid color background. So we get the best of both worlds. We could try to go back to the shading tab, go to world, and then change the direction. Or we could even go back to Google, to Polyhaven, and maybe I'll try this HDRI, which is called Brown Photoshop Studio. Won't worry about its project placement for now. I'll just throw it in here. And I'm going to delete it after I throw it in because it recognizes it as an image texture. But what we actually want is an environment texture. But it at least knows it's in. So I could take that and replace this environment texture. I can click X to delete this one, plug these nodes in, and bring it back. And I like that this shadow is a lot softer. So let me change up the angle of this. Maybe we do want a little bit of drama, so we can have mostly this front side lit. We could do all sorts of things. I'll change the background color too. And we can even go back to the object and change if we want it to even be metal or gold or blue or silver or anything of the sort. So for now, I'm going to reset these colors. And I'm just going to make them a nice plastic gray with a good amount of shininess. And I feel like that'll help us capture the nice bevels that we've created with the shaders and the awesome topology we spent so long working on. So I'll also change the color of this one. Maybe I could make it slightly darker. So let's go back into layout mode. We have our camera. I think I'll zoom in with our camera. So let's make sure it's selected. I'll zoom in a little bit. Or get a new angle, whatever I prefer. I'm using G to grab my camera, and I can press R twice to change the aiming of it. And I'm zooming in a lot because I like that it sort of compresses the length of all of this information. And there are a few extra settings in this section. I typically check out the color management all the way at the bottom. And if I want something really predictable, instead of having to focus on a little more cumbersome workflow, I'll click on standard view and medium contrast. And that looks okay, but I could also change the white balance directly from here and change the entire tint of this. And I think I like something a little bit cooler. We could change the exposure or even the contrast. So maybe I'll go high contrast or maybe medium low and then increase the exposure. And then we're not going to mess with a lot of these settings. I am hoping that a simple render will do the job. You could change how pixelated it is through the pixel filter. But for something a little more realistic like this, I'm going to keep it at 1.50. And now for the final moment, after hours of work, I'm going to click render and then render image. So it has a couple samples to render, if you could see up here, because it is trying to really beef up that detail. But if we zoom in, we can notice those nice specular highlights across the edges of all the low poly objects that we modeled. And believe it or not, at the beginning of the series, we started with just a cube and the most basic understanding of software in general. Hopefully I was able to teach you all the shortcuts needed to get this far. And if you could look at your model, you could see that you can Google maybe how to get into the sculpting phase, or how to get into the 3D printing phase, or how to get into the texturing phase, because 3D is a whole entire world. That's why I recommend you really do comment down below and let me know what you want to learn next, because this rabbit hole goes so deep. What I would recommend personally is learning how to optimize this further to UV map and texture it, and that's how we're going to get all the sick details like the stickers and the little imprints and the text. It would be an amazing time, so let me know how you feel about that. But I'm really satisfied with this render, and I could even... I'll even take this into Photoshop before I publish it online, maybe get some blur around the corners or darken it up or change the colors, but I'm really happy with this. One quick tip for fun, you could always turn on the wireframe overlay as well and share that off with your buddies because you put a lot of hard work into building these shapes. And I worked way too hard on this for some reason, so if you do subscribe, I would appreciate it. Check out all the stuff I do. I'm literally obsessed with all this, and I'm happy to continue further in 2026. Thank you for hanging out with me. You mean the world to me, and I hope to see you around again. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.